Hi everyone, welcome to this webinar. My name is Harry Russell and I'm a Senior International Account Manager and the Research Lead at Malpac.
Hey everyone, I'm Amy Campanella, Development Director for Textiles EPR at Reconomy. In this recording, we'll walk you through Spain's draft legislation on Textile Extended Producer Responsibility, or EPR, which was made available for public consultation in June. This is a crucial opportunity for all stakeholders who will be affected by the legislation to review the draft and submit feedback to the ministry in advance of the submission deadline in September. Our aim is to help you clearly understand the proposed requirements so you feel confident providing feedback either directly to the ministry or via our team as your compliance partner. Let's get started. Here you can see an overview of where Textile EPR is active or being implemented around the world. In light blue, we've highlighted countries where Textile EPR is mandatory. This includes France, which was the first to introduce Textile EPR back in 2008. Along with countries like the Netherlands, Hungary, Latvia, and North Macedonia, who also have active legislation. In green, we see countries where Textile EPR is in preparation, notably all of the European Union, where decrees for member states will be mandated via amendments to the Waste Framework Directive. EU member states are key markets to watch, with frameworks taking shape ahead of the EU's anticipated 2028 deadline. Also, please note California, where Textile EPR will be operational from 2030, and Chile, where last month, in June, the Ministry of the Environment officially declared textiles as a new priority product, marking the beginning of a design process for a decree of collection and recovery goals for textiles. In mid-blue, we've marked countries where voluntary systems exist, such as Australia, where take-back pilots and recycling initiatives are being trialed ahead of formal regulation. And finally, in dark blue, are regions where textile EPR is being debated or explored, including parts of North America like New York and Washington, as well as countries like India, where product stewardship and circularity are increasingly on the agenda. This global view shows how quickly textile EPR is gaining momentum and why it is important to prepare now for multi-country compliance, especially as legislation becomes more fragmented and complex. While textile EPR is starting to emerge globally, the European Union remains the most advanced region in terms of regulation. France led the way, starting textiles EPR in 2008. And since then, other European countries, such as the Netherlands, Hungary, and Latvia, have launched national systems. On the 12th of March this year, EU co-legislators reached a provisional agreement on the revised Waste Framework Directive, which formally introduces extended producer responsibility for textiles. The next key milestone is the vote in the European Parliament, currently scheduled for the 6th of October this year, 2025. If adopted then, we expect the final legal text to be approved by November 2025. From that point, each member state will have 20 months to transpose the directive into national law, bringing us to around July 2027. After that, each member state will have a further 10 months to make their national systems operational, meaning the EU-wide rollout of textile EPR is expected by May 2028. This gives brands and retailers just under 3 years to prepare, and in some countries, even less. Italy and Spain, for example, have already published draft legislation and are moving ahead of the EU timeline. The direction of travel is clear. Implementation is coming, and the clock is starting to tick. Let's turn to Italy, where the draft Textile EPR decree was published for public consultation on the 2nd of April, with feedback due by the 5th of May, a very short window. To support our clients in understanding what this means, we created an exclusive pre-recorded webinar. It walks through the draft legislation article by article, explains what's likely to be in scope, and outlines the obligations for producers, importers, and distributors. This video also introduces Redress, our dedicated Textile Producer Responsibility organization in Italy. We explain how we submitted feedback on behalf of our members, ensuring their voices help shape the final legislation, which we expect to be published in the official journal in late 2025 or early 2026. If you'd like to explore the detail in your own time, please scan the QR code you see on screen to access the video. This isn't just about understanding the rules. It's about being ready to comply and shaping what those rules look like. I'll now hand over to Harry, who will walk us through Spain's draft decree for textiles. He'll also share insights into other existing EPR legislation in Spain, as the textile regulation is expected to follow a similar structure. Harry, over to you.
Thank you, Amy, for the detailed introduction into the world of Textiles EPR. Now, I'd like to talk about what Textiles EPR will look like in Spain, starting with the reason for its introduction and its legal basis. The Royal Decree seeks to establish a legal regime to manage the waste of textiles products and footwear and promote a more circular economy within Spain. The initial draft of the Royal Decree on textile waste was released on the 23rd of June of this year by the Spanish Ministry of Ecological Transition. The draft decree was released as part of a public consultation, which runs until the 4th of September this year. Reconomy plans to submit a response as part of the consultation on behalf of its members, but we also encourage members to submit a response themselves, with links included at the end of this presentation. This draft decree on textiles waste was released after previous public consultation that closed in September of 2024. The legal basis of the decree comes from the new trilogue agreement that Amy previously mentioned, that revised the Waste Framework Directive, which in turn affected the Law 7/2022, otherwise known as the Spanish Law on the Waste for Circular Economy. This law laid down the initial legal framework for the transposition of Textiles EPR into Spanish law and has culminated in this draft decree. However, as the initial deadline set in the Spanish legislation was missed, the current iteration of the draft decree on textile waste has no implementation at the time of this recording. Now that we understand why and how this decree is being introduced, how does it compare to existing EPR waste streams within Spain? Here, we have a high-level summary of some of the main requirements for producers associated with EPR waste streams in Spain and how textiles would compare based on the proposed requirements in the draft decree. Textiles would be most similar to packaging EPR, as would be expected, with it being overseen by the same ministry within Spain. Both waste streams have generally the same requirements for producers outside of consumer labelling. As we will see later in this presentation, some of the requirements for producers in the new draft decree include annual data reporting, compliance scheme registration, and registration with the ministry. EPR for EM batteries is also fairly similar to the anticipated textile system, but differ most notably in terms of consumer awareness requirements and data reporting requirements, as would be expected due to the difference in the nature of the products. Other EPR systems are also being explored in Spain alongside textiles. These include wet wipes, balloons, and furniture. All of these are anticipated to be explored in more detail in 2026 and 2027. Further to this, we're expecting a revision to the Royal Decree 1055/2022, which established the packaging EPR system due to the introduction of the PPWR and its application in Spain from the 12th of August of next year. After looking at how textiles and footwear EPR system may compare to existing EPR systems, now let's turn our attention to the scope and its application of the draft decree. The scope and application falls exclusively to textiles and footwear products that are primarily domestic in use and which fall under one of the stated combined nomenclature codes within Annex 1 of the decree. The Combined Nomenclature Codes, or CN codes, are used as the basis for the declaration of goods within the EU and were initially introduced for use by the Council regulation in 1987, with their scope parameters updated every year. Any textile footwear product that is exclusively professional in use or is not covered by one of the CN codes in the annex is not included in the scope, alongside reused clothes, all of which are not obligated under the establishment of the waste management system. Moving on from the scope of the products, the definition of the producer under the new textile footwear EPR will be key in determining the obligations for who will be responsible for the financing of the system, among other things. Firstly, there will be no minimum threshold in place for in-scope textiles or footwear waste that will make a producer obligated, meaning that from the first article of textiles or footwear placed on the market, a producer will have responsibilities. However, small and mid-sized enterprises, otherwise known as SME enterprises, currently have different registration and reporting requirements to larger businesses under the draft decree. The aim of this is to ensure that they have less onerous obligations and smaller producers can still comply. Obligations will apply to those known as producers, who will be a business putting in-scope products on the market for the first time or offering them for free. This will include businesses with a physical presence in Spain, selling to other businesses or to consumers from directly within Spain, distant sellers to consumers from businesses outside of Spain, and those selling via marketplaces or online platforms. Those obligated producers selling via marketplaces or online platforms will have their compliance checked by the platform itself before being allowed to place products on the market. Further to this, all producers without a physical presence in Spain will be required to have an authorized representative to comply, as we saw on the previous slides. Certain economic agents will not be considered producers and will be exempt from obligations, including independent tailors and dressmakers who create unique items and those selling reused items of textiles. We expect further clarification on the exemptions when the decree is released. Those who are considered a producer of textile and footwear waste as defined under the draft decree will have several obligations, including registration, reporting, and demonstrating compliance under the EPR system. To look at a producer's obligations in more detail, a producer will have to register with the ministry in the textile section of the producer register in Spain within 3 months of entry into force of the decree. After registering, they will be issued with a registration number, which must be displayed on invoices and other documentation involved in the sale of the affected products in order to demonstrate their compliance. They will also need to create or join a collective compliance scheme to finance and organise the collection and treatment of waste. Compliance schemes will have 6 months from the entry into force of the decree to submit their applications for the approval with the ministry. Producers will also need to submit annually the total weight and number of in-scope articles based on the nomenclature codes placed on the market to both the producer registry, known as the ministry, and the compliance scheme. The submission dates for these are expected to fall in line with the packaging submissions, with data required by February the 28th to compliance schemes and 31st of March to the producer register. EPR fees will be paid to compliance schemes, which will finance the waste collection system, and we will look at how this will operate in more detail and in comparison to another country over the next few slides. Producers will be obligated to show visible fees, meaning their contribution to the compliance schemes on each invoice alongside their registration number. Producers who are found to be non-compliant can be penalised by the ministry, and this will be in line with the non-compliance penalties for packaging in Spain, with minor infractions penalised up to €2,000, moderate infractions between €2,000 and €600,000 or a 1-year sales ban, and those with severe infractions penalised between €100,000 and €3,500,000. This will all be based on the severity of penalisation at the discretion of the ministry. Now, looking at the Spanish compliance fees for textiles and footwear waste in more detail, whilst we have no official confirmation of fee amounts as the decree has not officially been published and no compliance schemes have yet been appointed, we do have information on how obligated producers' annual contributions will be calculated and further information on the modulation of these fees. The compliance fees for textiles and footwear waste, which will be used to fund the EPR system, will be charged based on the total weight and quantity of items placed on the market, with this information to be submitted annually to compliance schemes as part of the producer's reporting requirements. The draft decree also makes provisions for the modulation of compliance fees, often referred to as eco-modulation. This means that based on certain criteria, compliance fees might be raised or lowered for individual producers. The decree states that fees will be modulated based on eco-design standards under the EU Regulation 2024/1781, with articles of textiles and footwear that promote sustainability and recyclability charged lower fees. It also states, in a pioneering move, that fees will be modulated based on fast fashion practices, with fast fashion practices being measured by the volume of products introduced and the frequency of new collections, with a distinction between fast and ultra-fast fashion producers. Here we can see a basic overview of the eco-modulation system in France, which has been introduced this year. In a comparison to the Spanish scheme, it seeks to apply a bonus or penalty to producers based on the design of their products and based on if they are of a benefit or challenge to the system in France. The key difference between the Spanish eco-modulation system and the French system is the introduction of the penalisation of fast fashion brands. France has targeted these producers in alternate ways, but with the introduction of further textile waste legislation across the EU, it will have to be seen if there will be a harmonisation of requirements such as this or a further disparity within EPR systems. Finally, looking at a timeline of implementation of the EPR system, the draft decree was initially published on the 23rd of June this year alongside a public consultation. This will end on the 4th of September. After its conclusion, we expect an announcement on the decree later this year, and it's generally expected for the decree to be announced as coming into force in 2026, with its application coming a day after its publication in the Official Gazette. After that high-level overview of what to expect from this draft decree, I'll pass back to Amy to take you through some more comparisons and information on what to do next. Thank you.
Harry, thank you so much for the overview of the draft legislation. Now, let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Spain's draft textile EPR legislation aligns with many of the key themes we've seen emerging across Europe. But while the overarching goals are similar, each country applies its own set of rules. And this creates real complexity for brands and retailers operating across multiple markets. What's consistent across all 6 countries that have either adopted or proposed textile EPR frameworks is this: there are no minimum thresholds. Every producer placing textiles on the market directly to consumers, regardless of volume, must comply. This includes both physical, retail, and online sales. And if you sell through third-party platforms, we recommend clarifying with your solution provider whether they assume the EPR obligations on your behalf. It's a detail that can significantly impact your responsibilities. But the differences quickly become apparent when you look at specifics. Scopes vary, take-back targets are not aligned, and reporting frequencies differ. For example, France is the only country that does not require an authorized representative, or AR, for foreign distant sellers. In most other countries, a local AR is mandatory for non-resident producers. This means appointing a legal entity in that country to manage your compliance obligations, such as registration, reporting, and EPR fee payments on your behalf. Reporting frequencies are also inconsistent. France, the Netherlands, Italy, and Spain require annual reporting, while Hungary and Latvia require quarterly reporting. At EU level, there are plans to standardize the reporting format across member states, which is a positive development. However, countries will still be allowed to add their own national requirements. So while the structure may be harmonized, the details will still vary. And this is the key message. We currently have 4 countries with textile EPR legislation in force, 2 more with draft frameworks, and at least 21 others in the EU expected to follow. The direction of travel is clear, and the complexity will only grow. Now is the time to prepare. If this all feels overwhelming, you're not alone. That's exactly why we've developed our EPR Impact Assessment. It's a structured, practical way to bring clarity and get ahead of the EPR curve. Through our assessment, we help you understand existing and upcoming EPR legislation across global markets, identify where you're obligated and which products are in scope, forecast the financial impact of compliance to support accurate budgeting, assess your data readiness, including what good data looks like, and centralize fragmented data sets regardless of format. And most importantly, we provide a clear, actionable checklist so you're ready when EPR enforcement begins. This approach helps shift your business from reactive compliance to proactive strategy, turning regulatory requirements into a competitive edge. If you'd like to understand your obligations and explore your readiness, we're here to help. Our goal is to simplify compliance and support you in building an EPR-ready business. Now that we've walked through the key points of Spain's draft textile EPR legislation, let's talk about the next steps, because this is where action is needed. The public consultation is now open, and the deadline to submit feedback is the 4th of September. That gives us just a few weeks. If your organization wants to influence how this legislation is shaped, now is the time to act. There are 2 ways to provide your feedback. Submit your views directly to the Spanish Ministry for Ecological Transition via their consultation portal, or share your feedback with us, your compliance partner, and we will include it in the response we're coordinating on behalf of all of our clients. You'll see 2 QR codes on screen. One links you to a form where you can submit your input through us. The other links to the official consultation site if you prefer to respond directly to the ministry. We encourage you not to delay, whether it's questions about scope, data reporting, fee structure, or producer obligations. Your input shapes the final regulation. We're here to support you, and we're happy to review or consolidate feedback if that helps streamline the process for you and your teams. Thank you again for joining us today. We hope this session has helped clarify the key points of Spain's draft textile EPR legislation and, more importantly, what actions you should be considering next. If you have any questions, whether it's about Spain, another country's legislation, or if you're looking for support with EPR for textiles or any other fraction, please contact us. Reach out to myself or Harry using the contact details you see on screen. We're here to support you and we'll be happy to continue the conversation. Thanks again for your time, and we look forward to speaking with you soon.